When I think of horror games, I mean the ones that like really scare me, I think of games like PT.
After killing his family, the father hung himself with a garden hose they had in the garage.
Or Alien Isolation. Or the original Dead Space. Honestly, even that one where the main loop of the game is just being stuck in that endless Japanese subway tunnel. Backrooms, but like anime or something. Exit 8. Yeah, I mean, just go look at any overextended, overanalyzed video essay on YouTube about horror games, and they'll all say the same thing. It's an entirely different experience compared to reading a horror book or something like that. When playing as a character and physically controlling their digital form, you interact with them differently. You interact with the world differently. Little side note, I don't understand why people do horror books, right? I love reading. I got a whole bookshelf off to the side, but it's like, horror books, really? Like, I just flip to the end of the book. Like, I mean, it's hard for me to visualize something and be afraid of it. I don't know, maybe I'm just not literarily intelligent enough to be able to have my mind properly explicate the ways that it can scare itself. That sentence is definitely gonna get cut from the final video. That was not funny at all. The list of games I was talking about before, right? PT, that Silent Hill tech demo that unfortunately never saw the light of day, past being a tech demo? What did I write? It scares the player by its ambiance, right? It is confusing, especially when you're drunk and you're couch co-op in the game at your high school friend's ex-girlfriend's dad's house. It's confusing. It's just essentially an endless house. The uncanny, I hate to mention it twice, but Backrooms-esque environment is horrifying. It seems to extend into the void forever and ever until something changes, just like Exit 8. The game prides itself on creating strong feelings of unease, and then eventually that turns into just outright terror, more so than other horror games. Alien Isolation, on the other hand, has a different type of scare factor to it. It makes you panic, right? The xenomorph AI in the game always knows exactly where you are. Doesn't matter, you can't hide from it. You can't escape it, you gotta fight it, or you're gonna die, right? It's scary because of that. You always feel like there's something right around your shoulder. In Dead Space, if I'm being honest, I never played it, but I remember watching a Watch Mojo video on it and thinking, oh wow, yeah, this is scary. I have a tendency to only find things scary when they get in my head. Dread, the only genre that actually creates those teeth-clenching, booty-hole puckering, seat-gripping levels of dread for me, is psychological horror. Things like Hereditary or like Rear Window or something like that. Silence of the Lambs, those types of movies. I got way too used to jump scares from the early 2010s YouTube gaming scene. Sudden loud noises really aren't that scary to me anymore. They might make me jump, but they're just that. They're startling. They're not scary. Especially when you know when and where those jump scares are going to be.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. All the jump scares and...
Real, visceral fear comes from the unknown. Cyberpunk 2077 is not one of the games that I would consider to be scary, personally. Sure, there are plenty of examples of great areas, great set design, and zones that are uncomfortable to be in. In the more run-down zones of the game, sometimes it is ominous being in like the All Foods factory, things like that. But most of the discomfort comes from the gore or the set design, not really from anything kind of getting in your head. Or at least I thought. Early into the game, you got your crew, right? You have...
Either way, I'm taking the car.
Valentino, macho man gangbanger with a big heart and an even bigger stomach. And then you got T-Bug, a netrunner who's... not really that important to the full story. T-Bug was friends with...
Would you rather live in peace as Mr. Nobody, or go down for all times in a blaze of glory?
He's one of the bigger fixers in Night City, and he masterminded most of the heist with the help of a couple other people, and
Now, listen, dog. I have done exactly what you asked, so...
Yeah, he wasn't that important to the story either. Okay, well, you and your crew, you need a device. You need this bug. It's this cyberbug thing. You control it with a shard, and it's supposed to be invisible, but I mean, look at that. What is that? Come on now, you see that. Dexter needs this device. The guys he bought this device from, Maelstrom, have recently had a change in management, and the new leadership isn't as keen as the previous leadership was on giving up the device. I'll get more into Maelstrom later on, but this is the first time in the game you actually see Maelstrom. And right off the bat, it's clear as day what their whole shtick is. It's excessive cyberware. They want to look scary. Their current de facto second chair or PA or runner, coffee boy, whatever you want to call him, Dum Dum, is the one who introduces you to the big #1 guy, Royce.
Oh, hell no! Hell no!
And man, the first time I saw these two, they just really kind of made me uncomfortable, a little crawl in my skin. And even still now, they're not particularly pleasant to look at. Anyway, I wanted to share this fear with you in video essay format, and I kind of wanted to explain why I'm afraid of it and why you should be afraid of it too. This is body horror. Cyberpunk style. Okay, so before I get straight into Cyberpunk's body horror side, I want to give you a brief history on body horror. So I've mentioned it, but what really is body horror? The core of this horror subgenre is based in the attempted mutilation and modification of the human form. Most of the time, it's in ways that are deeply unsettling and grotesque, and often permanent. It's body horror. It's pretty self-explanatory. But it's not just jump scares or things that go bump in the night. It's not just regular horror. Instead, it's something more intimate and it's more invasive. It's more psychological. The concept is supposed to crawl into your skin and dig into that deep, primal, gut-level fear of things being wrong. It's also a thing in analog horror to some extent. You know that thing where they go and they modify old pictures of people into these grotesque... So the Canadian filmmaker David Cronenberg's name is synonymous with this genre.
I've seen folks describe you as a sicko, sadistic creep, based on your films, of course.
Of course.
Of course.
Nobody that knows me would say any of those things.
Sure. But people have walked out of your films.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with this most recent one.
I have no idea how people will respond to my work. That's the truth.
Cronenberg's goal with his body horror was to make you question where humanity ends and something alien, something wrong begins. But body horror isn't just some monolith, you know? It's like autism or sexuality. It's a spectrum. Am I allowed to say that? On one end, you got the monstrous, otherworldly things like The Thing, and The Thing, that's crazy. That's bodies stretch and split and become unrecognizable in an instant. It's a lot closer to straight up gore or torture porn like the Saw movies, if I'm being honest. What really gets under my skin are the changes that stick and leave the inhabitant with something that they didn't want, something that is wrong and inhuman. The ones you can't just walk away from. I'm talking irreversible distortions to the human form. The kind of body modifications that leave you feeling trapped, like you can't escape from something. On top of all that, whether or not the person to be modified was complacent in having their body modified, that's a whole nother can of worms. When it's forced, when you're forced to give up your humanity to have it stricken from you in a way that makes you permanently less than human, it's horrific. And it strikes a little bit too close to the real world. A scary creature in a movie it's scary in the moment, right? You know, he pops up and he screams and you're like, oh my god. But once the credits roll, it's over, it's done. The fear is done. Your suspension of disbelief has stopped, and you understand that nothing like that could ever exist in the real world. The horror that I find more interesting is the horror that lingers around. It's the kind that stays with you, that could exist in the real world that you don't have to have a suspension of disbelief for. And all of the modifications in Cyberpunk are somewhat believable. I mean, we already have things like Neuralink and bionic arms that use electrical impulses at nerve endings to be able to move like a regular arm. They're great scientific leaps on one hand. I'm sure people who are disabled are ecstatic about having the option to be able to have your arm back for some, $300,000, but still. But on the other hand, how far is too far? How much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice? Of course, all of this is subjective. Me, myself, I would prefer to get glasses with a HUD on them or, something of the more reversible nature. Someone else might be perfectly okay with sacrificing their humanity for so-called improvements. Regardless, I think that most of us would bat an eye at some back alley doctor who's claiming that for the cheap price of an arm and like $12,000 that they could make you the fastest sharpshooter on the...
Kuroshi Optics. Best I've got, and should be about right under the circumstances. Lights out for a minute, all right? That's what I thought. Well, how's it look? Feel all right to you? Glitches. You might feel a little discomfort at first. Done and gone while we were putting in your implant. Zap the critter. And once you hit the big leagues, don't forget where you came from.
Okay, as I mentioned before, Cyberpunk's modifications are grisly and, for the most part, completely believable.
Okay, let's test this. See the magic in action. Linking you in.
And they're also something that is entirely foreseeable in the near future, let alone in the next 50-something odd years. I mean, we already have the bionic arms and the Neuralink that I was talking about. The game's world, which exists somewhere between self-induced body horror and sci-fi mumbo-jumbo, blurs the line between what is considered necessary and what is in pure vanity. It raises some unsettling questions about how much of one's identity is tied to their physical form. The deliberate and often voluntary nature of the cybernetics adds a different level of psychological unease. It's not just about what cybernetic you can tack onto your body. Instead, how much of your body you're willingly surrendering in the pursuit of survival, power, beauty. This duality between grotesque and glamorous, surviving and thriving, lies at the heart of Night City and the entire narrative that CD Projekt Red has very carefully constructed around you, the main character, V. Continuing on, the lore is grounded in speculative realism. It serves as an entirely possible window into the future of humanity in the next 50 years. And it's disturbingly possible, as I said just a second ago. Sure, the cyberware in the game, the bionic arms, or chrome skin, or subdermal armor, whatever it is, they might look exaggerated, but if you peel back the proverbial layers of flesh, it's really not. I mean, the idea of interfacing directly with a piece of computer equipment is already here, and then on the other end, the robotics that the NCPD uses, MagTac uses. Those are also just about to be here. We have the ChatGPT, OpenAI, whatever it is, robot that kind of looks like one of the iRobot robots.
No.
And on top of that, we already have people falling in love with AIs. I mean, that concept was completely outlandish a decade ago.
Are you talking to anyone else right now? Any other people or OSs or anything?
Yeah.
How times have changed for Theodore. It's not hard to imagine that by 2077, we'll have technology that'll fit right in Night City. We'll probably be customizing our bodies in the same way we upgrade our phones every year. I mean, we're not too far away from eye implants that can display a heads-up display or augment reality, or even more basic things, just improving one's vision or getting rid of cataracts. The seeds are already there. They've been planted. It's just a matter of how far and also how fast we're willing to get there. All of this is to say, that the reason that Night City feels so real, besides the attention to detail and the way the NPCs interact when they're not doing whatever that is, Night City feels so real, is because the concepts that the game have aren't outlandish at all. They are deeply terrifying. It's not that far away from what we can do now. So think about humanity in 70 years. It's not fantastical, it's entirely possible, and it's positively terrifying. Anyway, this grim look into reality and all that, it freaks me out, future of humanity and corporations and chopping off arms and all that, yada yada and so forth. But specifically in 2076, the year that the spin-off anime for the game takes place, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, it also brings up some of more into the body horror side, but it still brings up some of those primal fears I was just talking about. The show is animated very well. It's heavily stylized, but it's just about as realistic as an anime can be. Specifically the scene super early into the show, whenever David first gets the Sandevis stand.
David.
He gets it grafted onto him by his Ripper dog.
I want this fused here. High time I chrome the
And the scene is kind of gory, isn't really the right word, but it's definitely bloody. He has his spine and probably a significant chunk of his nervous system completely removed, ripped out from him, in favor of a computer that can slow down time and increase his reaction speeds. But it pales in comparison to the final 2 episodes, I want to say, of the show. It's when David gets the cyber skeleton. And by this point, David is, what did Reddit say? Some 60 to 70% cybernetic. So it's not so much like he's removing appendages anymore, but to see the character complete his transformation, to transform from that to this, it's unnerving. He's transformed from a smallish, 18-year-old, someone who is was kind of built like me, into more machine than man, more twisted metal than flesh. He's become just twisted cybernetic implants that think for him and move for him. But getting to his final form, for lack of a better term, every time David gets a new implant, he's trading away just a little bit of his humanity in favor of robotics. He's freely giving up a piece of himself. Something about that, giving up a piece of yourself for human hubris, I guess, is innately wrong. And plus, it's a real hard decision to make, to give up chunks of yourself because of, this. Cyberpsychosis is defined by the wiki as a, quote, mental illness, specifically a dissociative disorder, that is caused by an overload of cybernetic augmentations to the body. By the end of the line in 2076, David, spoilers, succumbs to cyberpsychosis. He is following in the footsteps of the original head of the crew, Maine, who also succumbed a couple episodes beforehand. Maine lost control of his actions in the midst of a gunfight, but beforehand there had been a lead up to it. His girlfriend, Doria, had told him that he was starting to go a little bit insane, and then he went and he ripped someone's face off while they were net running. Doria told him that he needed to take a step back from his cybernetics, that he needed to take a breather, maybe downgrade a little bit, and Maine said no. The cyberware was beginning to dilute what he understood to be real and what wasn't real, and in a final blaze of glory, a gunfight, he ended up shooting and killing Doria and a significant amount of NCPD, Trauma Team, and MagTac. Later on in the gunfight, during a moment of clarity, he understood what was happening, even though he really didn't. He had quick flashes, brief momentary lapses in cyberpsychosis where he kind of was cognizant of the world around him. He tries to tell David to get out, And to some extent, David understands his message. He gifts David his gorilla arms, and then David uses the Sandevistan to escape, which is exactly what Maine wanted before he went fully psychotic. And this moment of clarity for Maine gives a real interesting look into the reality of psychosis, cyberpsychosis. Oh boy, is it time for an anecdote? I think it is. So I grew up in a small city in Kentucky. I mean, it was big enough, but still small enough that after 8 p.m., you could pretty much just go to the Walmart parking lot and just sit there and hang out. Needless to say, I ended up smoking a lot. Eventually, I upgraded. I went a step up to magic mushrooms. Ooh. I took some shrooms alone in my room late one night, and by this point, I had done them before. I thought I was in a good enough headspace to be able to take the shrooms and not have any problems taking them alone. For the first hour or two, it's kind of hard to tell, time dilation and all that. It was good. Everything was peachy. I was going through some type of filing cabinet, I guess, and I was just kind of exploring my personality and what made me how I am. Eventually, though, I somehow had managed to trip myself out. After that happened, I was just confused. I was just a confused husk of a person. I had no conceptions of why I was like this, who I was, where I was, anything like that. It was all just gone. And it wasn't that fun, believe it or not.
Why are you blue?
This experience led me to having a deep-seated fear of confusion, or at least the idea of losing myself. Talking more medically, dementia and Alzheimer's, both of those kind of fall into that category. The fear of forgetting, that one YouTube video that keeps getting recommended to me that I've already watched, sums it up pretty well.
At best, forgetting is simply inconvenient. At its worst, it can destroy a life, multiple lives. There are many truly awful ways you can die, but significantly few fates worse than dying. Not to mention that the chances of ever experiencing any of them are astronomically slim. Except dementia. I think dementia is one of those few, and it's one of my greatest fears.
But basically, just the idea of being in a permanent state of delirium, where you just don't really get what's going on around you, not remembering who is or who isn't. For Maine, it was not remembering friend from foe. For David, it was being in a completely frenzied state without knowing why. And that's what cyberpsychosis is. The mental illness is a pressing enough issue within the city that the police have made these videos about how to deal with cyberpsychosis.
Welcome to Safe and Sound. My name is Sergeant Dobbs, and today I'll tell you how to survive a cyber psycho attack. While out shopping, our friend Mr. Puggins suddenly hears screams and gunfire. His first instinct is to run for the nearest exit, but that would be a very bad idea. Your average cyber psycho will boost a reflex, which means outrunning is no sure thing.
They're goofy, they're made for kids, but still, they have max tag on standby. It's almost every day that there's an episode of someone losing it. It's a gamble every time you walk down the street. Maybe, just maybe, next time you shoulder check somebody, that will be enough to throw them off the deep end and they'll kill everyone around them. And that thought is scary. A couple in-game shards in 2077 give a bit of an insight into the way that the public in Night City views cyberpsychosis and how they've tried to find possible cures to the ailment, although most of them have not shown any real promise. One of the first shards you can get in-game, a manifesto called The Truth About Cyberpsychosis, gives some real insight into it. Quote, "I've had enough of the senseless shootings that claim hundreds of innocents every day. I'm sick of the satire on empty, dead-end implant restriction dialogue. I'm tired of ignoring the cyberpsychosis problem. In American society today, there are still a lot of common myths and misconceptions about the so-called technology-related personality disorders. People think they can become infected in sketchy Ripper Doc clinics. Scientists allegedly disagree about the causes of the disease, or even about whether or not it exists at all. Maybe their tune would change if a cyberpsycho turned their lab into a slaughterhouse. But even then, I doubt it. They're not getting fat paychecks from the cyberware lobby just to openly declare to the public all the nasty possible side effects that come packaged with their products. I've conducted my own research on cyberpsychosis. With supreme confidence, I can confirm that the illness is indeed a byproduct of the modern lifestyle and the obsessive emphasis placed on incorporating modern tech into our lives. Although cybernetic implants can directly affect our brain chemistry, they still only serve as a catalyst for the onset of the disease. Our world is subject to extensive dehumanization. We surround ourselves with increasingly more automated machines and artificial intelligences. Our loved ones replace their nature-given eyes, lips, and faces with masks of metal. Some of us begin to lose sight of what is human. We slip into feelings of total alienation and deep-rooted panic. We lose the ability to distinguish between what is real and what is only artificial, digital, synthetic. Some people begin to isolate themselves, lose empathy for others, and undergo dramatic mood swings that exhibit sadistic tendencies. The most frightening component to all of this, however, is that most will never be diagnosed. Not all cyberpsychos are known war veterans or former mercenaries equipped with Sandevistan reflex tech. Not all will go out in a blaze of gunfire with MagTag. Many cyberpsychos in our world possess only a single implant, a knee, a liver. They are unseen, unnoticed. They lock themselves up and shut out their friends, colleagues, and loved ones. The world outside the net and their delusions has disappeared from conscious thought. They are sick and alone, and no one is doing anything about it. There is no eloquent summary to be made here. Let the value of this manifesto be measured by the fact that I was expelled from the Zetatech cybernetic research team for having written it.
End communication.
The third to last paragraph gives some credence to my previous thoughts on psychosis, that it is something considerably related to other diseases of the personality like Alzheimer's, dementia, PTSD, things like that. It basically just forces someone into a frenzied state of paranoia and confusion. It also seems that cyberpsychosis is related to PTSD. Veterans and mercs that have gone through traumatic situations and have gotten post-traumatic stress disorder are already subject to paranoia and delusions. This is something that we see in the real world. They have trouble distinguishing fact from fiction. Fictionally, combine that with a misunderstanding over what is you and what isn't you, it's not so hard to see why cyberpsychosis is so prevalent among that group. Anyway, most of the cyberpsychos that Regina sends you to find in the city have some type of tragic backstory that can be found on a shard nearby if you don't just kill them and then skip through the dialogue like I did the first time I played the game. Don't do that. Important world building is afoot. There are 17 different cyberpsycho sightings around Night City, all of which are marked on your map from very early on in the game. From the top, starting with Watson. Zaria Hughes in Northside, a member of Maelstrom who, during initiation, was caught in the net and entered psychosis due to that. Also in Northside is one Lily Hine, a Valentino gang member who was kidnapped by Maelstrom, implanted with cyberware, and went full psycho. One more in Northside, Ellis Carter, a Maelstrom member who was loyal to Brick, the former leader of the gang that got tied up and thrown in the jail cell. He tried to take revenge on Royce, and it didn't go that well. Still in Watson, Matt Law is found in Kabuki with Lieutenant Mower. Law is a veteran merc who served in the Second Central American War, who had his arms blown off and was later laid off from his job, losing his health insurance and causing him to devolve into psychosis because he couldn't get his medication for PTSD. Lieutenant Mower was implanted with military-grade cyberware and realized that she was losing it. She called her doctor, who, instead of following the Hippocratic Oath and helping her, sent a hit squad after her. Finally, in Little China, one Alec Johnson is addicted to a drug called glitter that has been known to cause psychosis among its users. He tries to find a blood pump to assist him in overcoming his addiction before it's too late. He was too late. Okay, that's all for Watson. On to Haywood now. In Wellsprings, Gaston Phillips lost his life savings due to not reading the fine print of a contract. When Zetatech came to collect, he decided to fight them instead, leading to psychosis. Also in Wellsprings is Dao Hun, my personal winner for most tragic, and my personal winner for the hardest name to pronounce. Just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I can say all the Asian names. That shit is hard. She was a reality TV show star who was manipulated by the producers, along with her sister, into getting hideous implants on her wedding day, leading her to lose it. Now on to Santo Domingo. Chase Coley of Rancho Corrado, a construction worker who, to keep up with work pressures, had an exoskeleton implanted, or explanted, which was just too much in combination with his other implants. In Arroyo, one Tamara Crosby is a net runner who...
She dropped that ass on me from an egregious angle. They thought I was Stephen Wallace. Top shelf Zaza disrupted my circadian rhythm. I have seen the Magna Carta. I've seen the eye of horror. I was flipping bricks for Mansa Musa before y'all even became a Type 1 civilization. This shit ain't nothing to me, you stupid piece of shit.
Wasn't as lucky as him, he succumbed to cyberpsychosis and was left up to the whim of the desert gods. ONV. That was a lot. Sorry for putting you guys through that. But I think you can see my point now. Most of these people, save for a couple, were completely normal functioning people who were pressured to get implants and then went crazy because of it. Most of their lives had some type of tragic catalyst event that caused them to go completely crazy. And that's why Regina wants to save them. Oh, and I almost forgot. The chart I was talking about, the one that can be found in the All Foods plant, it details some of the older treatment methods, and they're kind of... Let me just read it to you. Can cyberpsychosis be cured? Opinions on that question are divided. Only a few years ago, so-called brain dance therapy was used across the entire country on a mass scale with the aim of bringing the sick back from the point of no return. The patient would be placed on a special chair and connected to a device that would deactivate all implants. Then, electrodes would be attached, inducing the patient into a coma-like brain dance session. This was then followed up by medicine, psychosurgery, and the aversion therapy. The overall treatment was intended to sever all the patient's neural connections and tie them back together so that the cyberpsycho could return to society. Once therapy was concluded, no symptoms of cyberpsychosis were detected, as well as the patient's former personality. But don't worry, nowadays other methods are used. At least that's what they tell us. See what I mean? They're very pre-modern medicine. But if times have changed, who's to say that whatever they're doing now isn't working? If I've learned anything by playing this game, it's to not take anything at face value. That snide remark at the end of that, maybe it was just some disgruntled worker. Maybe it is actually working. Who's to say? Definitely not me. I'll run with the assumption that it's working and not look too hard at it. I think that's best for everyone. But some of the victims of cyberpsychosis don't want to be cured. They like to teeter the line between being human and something else. Let me just show you. The world of 2077 has been permanently changed. The corporations have bought out everyone and everything. As long as they get paid, they don't really care about what's going on in the streets.
Oh, the buzzing of the bees and the cigarette trees, the soda water fountain, where the lemonade springs and the bluebird sings in that big rock candy mountain. On a summer's day in the month of May, a burly bum come a-hiking down a shady lane near the sugar cane. He was looking for his liking. As he strolled along, he sung a song of a land of milk and honey, where a bum can stay for many a day, and he won't need any money.
Warfare is commonplace now. There have been 4 distinct corporate wars by 2077, with a 5th one brewing under the surface if you look hard enough. And most of the time it's not between countries, it's between corporations. Night City is especially bad. Gangs are all encompassing. Efforts have been made to rid the independent state of gangs, but they've been largely unsuccessful. Each sub-district, save for the city center, because they have corporate security, has their own distinct gang. You got Valentino's in 6th Street in Haywood, Voodoo Boys in Pacifica, Tiger Claws in Westbrook. They don't stop coming. Watson, the so-called bad neighborhood in Night City, is subject to one specific gang. One that you meet very early in the story compared to the others. One that still shakes me to my core every time I see him. Enter Maelstrom. Told you I'd get to him eventually. They are where the lines between humanity and cyborgs just gets thrown out the window. Their whole aesthetic reinvokes that fear of body horror, the catalyst to this entire video essay. They were the original purpose. Maelstrom is harder to define than other gangs. Their whole thing is to modify themselves with the express intent of being above and beyond. I would say that they're the most outright evil gang. They want to look frightening. It's their sole goal. I mean, just look at this graffiti repping the gang. It's intimidating, right? Just like the Assaultatron Gorgons or whatever they are in Fallout 4.
I'm a woman, baby. Can't you tell?
But their look is not with the intention to scare onlookers into submission. No. They are just as violent as they look. The whole gang, essentially, is constantly slipping in and out of cyberpsychosis. It's something that they're proud of. It's a cornerstone of their entire culture. Every implant, every modification, it's just another Girl Scout patch to them. It's full commitment or nothing. Their in-game description, as dictated by Johnny Silverhand, so take it with a grain of salt, says that they are fetishizing cyberware and modifications.
Looking at Maelstrom, you might think. Now those are some hella bold pioneers of transhumanism. If they were only testing the limits of the human body on themselves, then you'd be right. Sadly, they also like to conduct experiments on those unfortunate enough to cross their path. Maelstrom is known for their exceptionally brutal and public gang executions. Combine that with illegal braindance production and a manic fighting style, and you've got yourself a gang with a reputation as a band of lunatics on the verge of cyberpsychosis.
They revel in the discomfort they cause. They wear their body modification and implants as a badge of honor. Cyberpsychosis isn't an unfortunate side effect for them. It's their goal. They traded their humanity for something more violent. It's full commitment or nothing. I mean, if cyberpsychosis was knocking on the door late at night, they would open the door with open arms, offer him a glass of water, you know. They aren't the one who knocks. But that's not to say that no other individual in Night City hasn't made that exact same decision to open the door. Everyone has, whether they be from corporations or just from the streets. Humanity means nothing anymore. And that's what's scary about the world you see in 2077. Okay, phew. That was a long video. It was a long video to make too. I've been editing that for the better part of a month and a half now. But thank you for watching. The list to the music is in the description. It's just a master list. I always like it whenever a YouTuber puts that out. I have another video in the works. It's about her. I think you guys will like that one. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks again, all that generic stuff. My ice machine just dropped ice, but yeah.